Welcome back, viewers, to the latest researches and news. As you know, we have covered the August 1st fighting at Shirena from every angle, the claims from both sides, the evidence, the captured soldiers, the drone strikes. Now it is time to go deeper. Today we decode the Shirena operation. What were the Ethiopian federal government's real objectives going into this battle? How was the propaganda campaign planned? And why did it fail? And what are the three possible futures for this conflict after Shirena? Let us begin with the strategic picture. Because the Shirena operation was not a single-purpose military action, it had at least 4 distinct objectives, each targeting a different dimension of the conflict. Objective 1. Break the Tsimido coalition by exploiting Amhara identity politics. The federal government deliberately framed the Shirena operation around a specific territorial narrative that the Tigray People's Liberation Front had attacked Wukit, the contested western Tigray area that the Amhara community claims as historically Amhara territory. This framing was designed to do something politically critical: drive a wedge between Amhara Fano and the Tigray People's Liberation Front by telling the Amhara public that the Tigray People's Liberation Front was threatening their claimed land. If Amhara communities could be made to see the Tigray People's Liberation Front as an aggressor against Amhara territory rather than as a fellow resistance movement against Abiy Ahmed's government, then the emerging Tsimido coalition between Fano and the Tigray People's Liberation Front would be politically damaged before it could fully solidify. It was a calculated attempt to use territorial identity as a weapon against the coalition. Objective 2. Pull Tigray Defense Forces Army 70 away from the Sudan theater. We have reported extensively on Tigray Defense Forces operations in Sudan, particularly Army 70's active presence in the Blue Nile and Kordofan areas of Sudan, where it has been operating in coordination with Sudanese armed forces against the Rapid Support Forces. The federal government had an interest in disrupting this presence because Army 70 operating in Sudan strengthens the Tigray People's Liberation Front's regional footprint and creates operational pressure that benefits Sudanese forces aligned against the Rapid Support Forces. The Shirena operation, launched in western Tigray near the Sudan border, was intended to force Army 70 to redirect attention and resources back toward western Tigray, away from Sudan. By creating a crisis at home, the federal government hoped to pull Tigray Defense Forces' Sudan-based forces back to the defensive, making the situation in Blue Nile and Kordofan more favorable for the Rapid Support Forces, which the federal government has been providing varying levels of support to. Objective 3. Provoke Eritrea into a response, then use that response. Shirena sits in a strategic triangle. Ethiopia, Eritrea, and Sudan all share proximity to this zone. The operation was positioned in a way that could be interpreted as threatening Eritrean interests, or that could produce Eritrean military movements in response. If Eritrea had responded militarily to the federal government's Shirena operation, the federal government would have had a powerful narrative tool that Eritrea had attacked Ethiopian sovereign territory. That framing Eritrea as an aggressor on Ethiopian soil would have been used to seek international sympathy, delegitimize the Tsimido alliance as foreign interference, and justify escalation with Eritrean involvement framed as defense rather than aggression. Eritrea, aware of this dynamic, responded by sending senior military commanders into Tigray publicly in Zalambesa rather than through military force, a visible political demonstration of support for the Tigray People's Liberation Front without the military engagement that would have given the federal government its narrative hook. Eritrea understood the trap and declined to step into it. Instead, it stepped around it. Objective 4. Test Army 13's real capabilities. The Shirena operation was also, at least in part, a live assessment of the Tigray Defense Forces Army 13, its actual combat power, its weapons, its fighting discipline, and its operational capacity under real engagement conditions. When military planners consider a major offensive, they want to know what they are facing in practice, not in theoretical assessments. By engaging Army 13 at Sharena, the federal government created a live test environment. What emerged from that test, the losses taken, the captures, the drone strikes, the resistance encountered, provided real intelligence about what the Tigray Defense Forces is actually capable of in combat conditions. The result of that test, based on everything we have reported, hospital overflow with wounded Ethiopian National Defense Force soldiers, confirmed captures of Ethiopian National Defense Force personnel, 3 tanks and 5 vehicles reportedly destroyed, suggests that Army 13's capabilities exceeded the federal government's expectations. The test produced information the federal government did not want. Now let us look at the propaganda operation that ran alongside the military operation, because this is equally important to understand. The intended plan was elegant in its logic. Step 1. Launch the military operation and achieve rapid, visible success. Defeat Tigray Defense forces in the field, capture positions, kill or capture fighters. Step 2. Have the pre-positioned media teams capture the success on camera footage of federal forces advancing, of Tigray Defense Forces positions being taken, of the resistance collapsing. Step 3. Broadcast that footage across Ethiopia and to international audiences with a clear message. The Tigray People's Liberation Front cannot defend its own people. Its leadership is weak. Its fighters are failing. The resistance is over. This message was designed to achieve 3 things simultaneously. Demoralize Tigray's civilian population. Validate the warnings of voices like Tzadkan Gebretensai, who had claimed he could be in Mekele within a month, and politically weaken the resistance by making it appear that the Tigray People's Liberation Front's military promises had failed. But the ground reality that emerged was not the footage the media teams were positioned to capture. Instead, Tigray Defense Forces held its positions. It conducted drone strikes that reportedly destroyed 3 Ethiopian National Defense Force tanks and 5 military vehicles. Large numbers of Ethiopian National Defense Force soldiers were captured. Gonda Hospital received a surge of wounded federal forces. The federal government issued no comprehensive official account of the engagement. The footage that circulated after August 1st was not the federal government's pre-planned victory reel. It was footage of captured Ethiopian National Defense Force soldiers, of celebrating Tigray Defense Forces fighters, of a hospital in Gonda managing a surge of military patients. The propaganda plan was reversed by the ground result. The media team's position to film a federal victory ended up in a situation where the story going out was the opposite of what was intended. The more the federal government pushed the narrative of victory without credible visual evidence to support it, the more that narrative was challenged by what was being independently documented and circulated. Credibility once lost in this kind of information environment is very difficult to rebuild. Now looking forward. After Shirena, after the propaganda failure, After everything we have analyzed tonight, what are the realistic paths this conflict can take? We see three main scenarios. Scenario 1. The federal government launches a new offensive. Faced with a damaged narrative and military objectives that were not achieved, the federal government may choose to launch a new and larger offensive to attempt to recover the credibility and the strategic ground that Sharena did not deliver. This is a possible outcome. The political pressure on the federal government to demonstrate strength is real. After telling Parliament in July that the combined Tigray People's Liberation Front, Eritrea and Sudan alliance poses no serious threat, and then having the Shirena engagement go the way it went, maintaining that position without action becomes difficult. But a new offensive carries enormous risk. A larger military operation in the Tigray theater at a time when Fano is conducting its campaign for unity across Amhara. The Oromo Liberation Army is expanding in Oromia. And the Afar National Unity Revolutionary Front has just revealed itself would require massive resources deployed to one front while the others remain active. A prolonged war in Tigray has already demonstrated between 2020 and 2022 that it does not produce quick, decisive results. And the Tigray Defense Forces is now better equipped and better prepared than it was when that last war began. Scenario 2. Proxy war settles in and the region destabilizes. A second possible path is that no side achieves a decisive victory, but that rather than de-escalating, the conflict transforms into a sustained multi-actor proxy war. The Rapid Support Forces continues to receive varying levels of Ethiopian federal government support on the Sudan side. The Sudanese Armed Forces continues its relationship with the Tigray Defense Forces. Eritrea deepens its military integration with Tigray through the Semido framework. Egypt positions itself further through Somalia. The Oromo Liberation Army expands. Fano advances in Amhara. In this scenario, no single battle decides the outcome. Instead, the conflict grinds across multiple fronts, fueled by regional actors with competing interests, none of whom are willing to allow the other side to achieve a decisive win. Ethiopia burns slowly, while the region around it destabilizes simultaneously through interconnected conflicts. This is perhaps the most dangerous scenario, not because it produces immediate catastrophe, but because it makes a resolution increasingly difficult to reach, while making the humanitarian costs continue to accumulate for millions of civilians. Scenario 3. Shirena opens the door to negotiation eventually. The third scenario, and the one that would be most beneficial for the people of Tigray and for Ethiopia as a whole, is that the outcome of Shirena, combined with the broader military situation, creates conditions that eventually push toward genuine negotiation. The logic of this scenario is as follows. The federal government's propaganda plan failed. The narrative of an easy federal victory has been discredited. The Semido alliance has demonstrated that it can fight back and that Eritrea is publicly committed to Tigray. The four objectives behind the Shirena operation were not achieved. These failures may create space for a reassessment within the federal government, particularly among voices who understand that prolonged military conflict under these conditions will not produce the outcome that was anticipated. On the Tigray People's Liberation Front side, the strong position it is currently in, militarily and diplomatically, means it can negotiate from a position of strength rather than desperation. It is no longer a defeated force seeking mercy. It is an armed party with allies, weapons, and demonstrated battlefield capability. But the path to negotiation has very high barriers. The status of Western Tigray, which the Amhara community controls, and the Tigray People's Liberation Front demands returned, is not a small concession for any party. The Tigray People's Liberation Front's political recognition by the federal government, which would mean accepting the legitimacy of a government Addis Ababa has described as illegal, is a significant political step. The economic blockade of Tigray must be addressed, and the Pretoria agreements and fulfilled provisions on displaced persons, on transitional justice, on security arrangements all require genuine engagement. None of these are easy conversations, but they are the conversations that would actually resolve the conflict rather than simply producing a pause before the next escalation. Let us bring today's full analysis together. The Shirena operation had 4 real objectives: break the Tsemido coalition through Amhara identity framing, pull Tigray defense forces out of Sudan, provoke Eritrea into a damaging response, and test Army 13's capabilities. None of these objectives will fully achieved. The propaganda campaign, pre-positioned media, planned narrative, designed demoralization was reversed by the ground reality that Tigray defense forces produced. The story that circulated after August 1st was not the federal government's story, and the conflict now stands at a fork in 3 roads: a new offensive with high military and political risk, a grinding proxy war that destabilizes the entire region, or, eventually, a difficult but possible path toward genuine negotiation from a position of strength on the Tigray People's Liberation Front side. The issues that were unresolved before August 1st Western Tigray, the economic blockade, political recognition, the full implementation of the Pretoria Agreement, remain unresolved today. Those issues do not disappear from a military victory or a propaganda campaign. They only disappear from negotiation. Now we want to hear from you. After everything we have analyzed tonight, what do you believe the Ethiopian federal government's next move will be after Shirena? Escalation? Stalemate? Or does a path to negotiation open? And if you want a deeper comparison of these 3 scenarios in a dedicated video like this video, and tell us in the comments. Like, share and subscribe and ring the bell so you never miss an update.